Welcome everybody to our last MAC national webinar. It's part of a series that we ran through since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, all the way through Ramadan, hosting a variety of speakers, scholars, covering basically the situation and covering basically the Muslim reaction to this situation. And the highlight and the peak of this reaction was actually in Ramadan. That is always a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala too. So it actually helped us, and through these webinars and discussions and online meetings that we all had, helped us navigate and guide these difficult times. My name is Khaled Alqazzaz, and I am currently the Director of Education at the Muslim Association of Canada. And I'm responsible mostly for the education work across our schools and centers, and mostly in community education. And exciting enough, I've started before this crisis working on an e-learning project with the Muslim Association of Canada for MOOCs and free online courses. We did a soft launch for elearning.macnet.ca with courses with Dr. Jamal Badawi, Dr. Jasir Ouda, and many other scholars that are practical for Muslims to use and benefit from. So the focus on online actually started off right after, which drove me to be part of this production work throughout Ramadan and throughout the crisis. And we're fortunate to connect with amazing people like Dr. Dalia Fahmy and Sister Rania Lawendy, who are with us here today. We're planning to run today in a different setting and format than what we had before. We'll try to have this as a more of a discussion in this last fold of Ramadan, and try to share some of our reflections and experiences with Ramadan during these special times. And to properly introduce Dr. Fahmy, who is an associate professor at Long Island University in New York, and on the board of many interesting organizations that fill a huge gap for our Muslim community in North America, with ISPU and the Yaqeen Institute. They're actually setting the stage for Islamic research that is needed at this time. And of course, many other things along with the focus, academic career and focus that are very relevant to our community and to many Muslims throughout. She specifically asked to stay into the community interest and basically try to reap a reward in those last hours of Ramadan. So inshallah, this is all this is all connected. And that's also the beauty of social sciences. It is always connected to what we do. We also have Sister Rania Lawendy, who is a colleague on the executive committee of MAC as the director of junior youth. She's also a principal of Maple Grove School in Waterloo, Ontario, and she is a community leader and has been involved in so many initiatives and community work, and spoke frequently in many different settings. So I anticipate an interesting discussion, and I want to ground this discussion into really two basic concepts. One is basically being centered around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that everything that we are facing and seeing and involved in is about, on the individual level, is about your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how does this reflect, and how does this take you closer to Him or further away from Him, it being the crisis or Ramadan as both potentially opportunities to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second one is basically us as a collective Muslim community in North America, how we take these special incidents, special situations, special times, again, with COVID or with Ramadan, because every Ramadan is an opportunity that the Prophet ﷺ has pray to live until he witnesses the next Ramadan. So it is, every Ramadan is a special opportunity. So how do we collectively seek those and actually transform collectively into a better versions of ourselves, or a better community, in what people are now using a term called new normal. And it should not be shocking to us that we always seek a better new normal for ourselves, and we're never satisfied with our status quo with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We always want to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as individuals and as community. So between our individual response to the crisis and to the situation in Ramadan, and the collective response, we're having this discussion. We've done many introductions around MAC, but I would ask Rania to start off just doing a quick intro about MAC, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. Jazakallah khair, Khaled. For those of you who don't know MAC, MAC is the largest Muslim organization in Canada. Alhamdulillah, we have 13 chapters established across the country. We have 8 full-time schools, 17 centers and mosques, and 14 part-time schools across the country in 14 cities. So we have Quran-only schools, and we also have the Arabic Quran and Islamic studies, alhamdulillah. Our reach is quite far, and we're happy about it. We have close to 80,000 Canadians annually that we reach. We focus on providing Muslims across the country and Canadians at large with basically spaces and services and programs that contribute to holistic education. We look at personal development, social and community services. This past year alone, MAC, alhamdulillah, has supported 87 local charities across the country that are involved in very important community development, and they work with all sorts of different sectors of society. We work with shelters and refugee settlement and homelessness and food programs. Actually, one of the wonderful things that have been happening this Ramadan in response to COVID is the MAC Give Food Share program. Many of the cities have done really well with that, especially Mississauga, I know Waterloo, Edmonton, Montreal, Calgary. A lot of the cities have really done really well. We also look at youth empowerment initiatives. And the big thing with us, alhamdulillah, is we believe in grassroots mobilization and strong partnerships with diverse members of our communities. We also have Eid prayers, and I know we have a huge Eid festival coming up, and you can go to www.eidfestival.com, I think maceidfestival.com, but I know Brother Khaled is going to be giving a little bit more about that for Eid Day. We have a huge program planned, inshallah. With MAC Give, we have our seniors program, we have mental health training, we have workshops, we have expos across our schools, and alhamdulillah, our schools are participating in a lot of social justice initiatives, including Orange Shirt Day and residential things around residential schools. We also had a really cool home bank in the prayer in the 6, which we partnered with the United Way, and I was able to be a part of that, and that was really great. We have the MAC Give blood drive, and like I said, the MAC Give food drive, and alhamdulillah, all the departments have been doing a lot of wonderful activities this Ramadan through the online platforms, really serving people across the country. So that's just a little bit about that. And if you want more details, you can always go to www.macnet.ca, and the Connect Hub is where you can find all the activities.
Thank you so much, Rania, for this intro, and let's get into the discussion right away. So, and then people, please feel free to send in your questions on the Q&A section at the bottom, or you can also, the chat is less checked, so the Q&A would be an easier place to send your questions. Once we answer, you'll see that these questions were taken. So we'll start off with this discussion, and then we'll take questions from the participants and the audience right away. So we want to start off really, if Dr. Fahmy can reflect on how is this Ramadan different and special during this COVID-19 crisis, with all the loss around us, with all the the isolation, the different conditions that we're facing. How is it really different, and how do you reflect on this?
Well, first, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much, Brother Khaled and Sister Rania, for allowing me to join you on this MAC platform. I'm a little further south of you guys, but you know, it's you guys are my friends, but also I feel like we're all one big community. I appreciate what we're going through in different ways. So if you think about the current crisis that we're in, here on the East Coast in the United States, it started in the beginning of March. And very quickly, by the end of March, the community was hit in very difficult ways. Not just was the number of cases going up, at least here in New York and New Jersey, but every single one of our families was hit with the COVID crisis. And then we start to see loss. And then you are in this social isolation mode where you are missing all the social interactions. And then Ramadan starts. And if you think about what the Muslim community does in Ramadan, it's all based on communal gatherings in the mosque, right? Communal gatherings in the masajid where we come together for the sake of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we saw our community stripped of the physical institution of the masjid, right? That physical connection that we would come together in worship to attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I remember in the week before and the first week, we were all having these webinars of how can we transfer our Ramadan into a successful Ramadan, right? How can we reorient ourselves? And subhanAllah, it became very quickly apparent that we as a community can move beyond the physical structure of the mosque and actually take the spirit of community and go outside the physical structure of the mosque. So you start to see that the number of food distribution from the Muslim community skyrockets. The number of PPE giving away to those that need it. But more critically, the way we started to relate to our own families, to our own neighbors, to our own neighborhoods, maybe it was this moment that was required to happen, if there's a silver lining, for us to reorient what does it really mean to be a community? What does it really mean to be a neighbor? What does it mean to really check on the elderly in your community? Which is what we really have had to do because they have no one around them. And what was a crisis very quickly became a different way of finding worship for the sake of Allah outside of the physical attributes of our institutions, but through the spiritual and social connectedness that we all found in these miraculous ways. And if you think not just about the amount of giving, but the amount of connection, deep connection, how many of us have sat with our families for the first time and had really deep questions answered, right? Like who are these people that live in our homes? Have we sat and had these conversations? Or have you contacted your parents or your elders or your community elders and said, how are you? And entered in a different kind of dialogue. And so what we thought was a critical test on top of a critical test ended up reflecting that the Muslim community not only increased its giving capacity, but reoriented what it means to actually build community in the middle of crisis. Now, we have been talking, especially in the beginning, about this is temporary, and then we're just going to go back to normal. And then we're going to go back to normal. The way I see this crisis, on top of the critical juncture of Ramadan, subhanAllah, I always tell myself, when we were told that the shaitan is chained, right? All of us, our devils are chained. I always thought about it like this, that maybe Allah is allowing us as individuals to get a glimpse of a better version of ourselves. How do we actually act when all of that distraction is gone, right? Think about how much increase in ibadah we're doing, how much increase in Salah, how much increasing in reading Quran. And here we are in a health crisis, Ramadan in isolation, but we're also given this opportunity to reflect on who we are. And so if you think about it in the context of, do I want to go back to normal? Maybe not. Maybe what we actually want is to move forward with a different orientation of what it means to be a mu'min, what it means to be a Muslim, what it means to be in a community, in a family. And so if we take the silver lining of this lesson and change the narrative in our heads of we're going to go back to normal and maybe move forward with a sense of purpose and compassion and a new definition of community, we can begin to rethink about this moment as crisis and rather as a moment of conversion of orientation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fahmy. This is actually an interesting insight into all of this as we try to explore basically many things that we've taken for granted. So this gave us actually an opportunity to appreciate what we really have, to appreciate what is really worth it that we do and that we engage in, and that what we build on or build from this point. And like the many blessings that we've taken for granted, this opportunity to really reflect and have this introspection is, I think, crucial at this point to really have a plan forward, to really decide what are your next steps. And in a test situation like the one we're in, people's automatic reaction is, well, when will this test end? What is going to happen after, right? All these unknown questions. I think these are ways. These are not the best way to look at the situation. I think the best way to look at the situation is, what do I have? What are the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept for me? And what can I build on these blessings in this current moment and in this situation? My test is now. My test is the moment that I'm in, how I'm interacting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could take me at this moment, at this second. What was my heart like with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And it could be COVID or it could be anything. And death comes in COVID, after COVID, in many different situations. Tests and tribulations come in many different forms. So really, what am I building on is really that should be the focus, and what I build towards. And this drives me to the next question, unless Rania has a comment here. So basically, what do I plan for? What is my success criteria for good practice, for a good believer? How do I become better, really, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala under these difficult situations, and knowing that actually sometimes difficult situations are what drive you to be better. So we can still look at this in a positive lens, even though it's quite difficult.
Yeah. So, you know, when we talk about success, we automatically do those Amazon searches of books on success, right? What makes someone successful? Maxwell's How Do Successful People Think, right? Or the bestseller of Think and Grow Rich, or Mindset, right? The New Psychology of Success, or for women, the book that drives me bananas, you know, Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. I confess, I have some of these books here. And when we think about historically how success has been defined, it's always in the material sense, right? All of these are books on markers of success that are not just material, but they're tied to getting power. And the way we think about success today, or the markers of success, it's, you know, the 2.2 kids, the McMansion, 2 cars, the degrees on the wall, and that's the definition of success. And when we think about the person that has it all, that's that person, right? That's attained those physical markers of success. But when we think about, how do I define success for myself as a Muslim? Why do we turn to those books or those self-help shelves at Barnes and Noble? Why do we not turn to the one place where the answer has been written so clearly? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Mu'minun, the first ayah is, successful are the believers. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. And here's the answer. It's, subhanAllah, so clearly put. Successful are the believers that do what? They offer their prayers on time. Offer their prayers and their prayers on time. And those who stay away from false talk and evil and gossip and trolling on the internet, right? And those who pay their zakat and guard themselves from all different types of temptation. But the faithful are those who also uphold their amana, right? Or who guard the amana. And if we think about what these are all the social principle values of what it means to be a good person with a life in service, with a deep connection to Allah. But we have been fed this narrative of success is these physical, material things tied to power in this world, while they're so not tied to the way which we think about success towards the hereafter. And so it becomes that we need to think about, are there ways for us to reorient ourselves to think about the conditions of success? I'm not saying don't work hard, don't get the degrees, don't be successful in this life. I'm talking about how do we translate those material understandings of success to the bigger picture, right? The success towards the hereafter. And I know when we have spent 29 days and probably our lifetimes listening to lectures that tell you you need to have a deep connection. But what I want to do is actually be practical in that, because there's probably a lot of young people or youngish people on here today who are thinking, yeah, sounds fine and good, right? Tell me how to do it. And I always think that, subhanAllah, our faith is really simple in the solutions it gives us in ways to open pathways. So let's say I'm a college student and I'm going to wake up, study hard, go to class, maybe go to work, come home, be with my parents, and then go to sleep. But what if I actually do all of that with a different particular orientation, which is I get up and I renew my intention. And that my intention is everything that I do. The same thing, getting up, going to school, studying hard, going to campus, getting a job, whatever it is with this orientation that everything I do for you, everything I do is for your sake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does it mean to really renew our intention every day? I ask myself, when was the last time I renewed my intention? The second is, when we talk about, the second ayah is about prayer, is about Salah. And some of us enter that kind of mechanized Salah, especially out of Ramadan. I know we're in this like spiritual moment, but how do we carry that spirituality outside of Ramadan? When prayer is mechanized and it doesn't give us that pause time to think and reorient ourselves, sometimes we have to ask ourselves why, what's going on? And I've been blessed with the opportunity to travel the world and meet scholars from all over the world and activists and political leaders. And I always end my interviews or conversations with them asking one question: what do you advise me? And I can't tell you that maybe 90% of the time I'm told, get a wird of afkar and hold on to it. I'm not kidding. Systematically, I have been told, do you have a wird of afkar? Some afkar that you say regularly, that you begin the day with and you end the day with. And we're not talking about something difficult here. I was in this halaqah and I was telling everyone, I was like, you know, if it's hard to think that I can't memorize a small amount of remembrances, there are so many afkar apps, and I can recommend some and put them in the chat box, right? And so one of my favorites is 22 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and subhanAllah, within a month you have it memorized, because it's part of the way you begin your day, you begin your commute, you begin your carpool. And I always say, subhanAllah, can you imagine what a day is like that begins with the remembrance of Allah and ends with the remembrance of Allah? Then like, what is the time value in the middle? It's completely different. And we're still doing and operating the same modes. We're still taking our kids to school. We're still going to work. But it has a different flavor and a different feel. And so these simple things of intention, or the intentionality, and the having a wird of afkar to protect our day almost. And then finally, when we actually get down to it, when we sit down and do the work and the study and the kids who are studying for final exams, that they do them with excellence, that they do them because it's not for the sake of the grade, but it's for the sake of something greater, because Allah likes those who are actually excelling in everything, who are striving for the pleasure of Allah. I'm going to study hard for this chemistry exam because I'm striving for the pleasure of Allah. I'm not simply aiming for a grade or to get into medical school. And so when we think about what makes an individual successful, it's really about the reorienting of the mindset of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm doing everything for you, in a really intimate way of the intentionality, the having the word of Azkar, and then doing everything with excellence. And then if you don't get what you want, we believe in the will of Allah. We believe that rizq is written. We believe in the qadr of Allah. And so if you began with those three principles, then accepting the qadr becomes very easy. And I'm sure all of us have gone through these moments where when you actually attain that, you're like, okay, I'm actually happier. I actually feel more flavor and success in the small everyday things that I do. And so when we talk about how to be successful, yeah, there's the book version and there's the material version and there's the how do I attain power in this world so I can move up the ladder. But what if moving up the ladder is tied to a goalpost that's beyond this world, and that you only want to move up the ladder if Allah has it written for you and it's for the sake of His pleasure? And so sometimes I think reorienting the definition of what it means to be successful requires that.
I also want to get Rania into this discussion, but I want to just build on one of the concepts you mentioned here. And I really like the approach of actually simplifying things. Islam came through the Prophet ﷺ's message to everybody. It's the young and the old, the Bedouin and the person in the city. And it is in its core a very simple yet real and a deep message. And I think really one step that you helped us in this short presentation is actually find that simple equation for yourself and actually take these few steps based on that simplicity. I would also add to it that this deen, you'd always find the belief always tied with good action, because good action confirms whatever. So that's not only wishful thinking and wishful imagination, but it's actually more into confirming what's in the heart with your tongue and with your action as well, which all leads into that confirming cycle as well. So that I personally find myself in action, and many of the things that we're involved in. So that action with this right orientation that spoke about actually confirms anything, and it just makes you able to build and accumulate that experience. I want to take it to Rania as an education expert, and actually with the interesting age where you actually have to simplify the message. Yes, you have complicated rubrics in your schools to measure, to assess success and assess progress. But really in Islamic school, many of the things that you want to assess is actually very similar to what Dr. Fahmy was talking about here. And so really, how do you make this mix? Because it's much easier for the student. I also have an education background as well. It is always, how do you make that somehow abstract and subjective experience? And when you lay it down to the students and the children in front of them, it helps them actually proceed and progress. So how do you do that in a context of an Islamic school? And how do you actually help students find that simple equation about this deen that helps them apply it in their day-to-day lives?
So, I mean, what Dalia was talking about is really simply put a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we have a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it really drives everything else that we do. And what she said is true. How do I get that connection? Because that's what a lot of youth and students have an issue with. One of the things that we have in our schools is something called the iRise program, and we focus on, so it's interesting because Dalia, it's everything that you said. So Rabbaniya is at the center of it, and so how do we make it simple for students is that muraqabah mindset. And it's actually about shifting a paradigm about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of I'm also a chaplain at the university, and so I deal with a lot of university students, and they've been raised in kind of weekend Islamic schools that have not taught them what Allah truly is. And so for them, Allah is about fear. And as a mu'min, we have to be between fear and hope, right? And so they forget the hope piece of it. And so when you're in a paradigm of always being scared, it kind of shifts how you look at things and how you act. And I think we try to focus from an education perspective on the hope part, on the love part, on that, muraqabah mindset that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He loves you, He's there, He's watching you, He's watching over you. But interestingly, one thing I'd like to say simply, and I say this to my students and to my students at university, is whatever you consume consumes you. And I think, Dalia, in the beginning, you were talking about how Ramadan has become such an external thing for people, right? So it's about going to the masjid, and it's about the azumat, or like people coming over for dinner parties, or even going out and doing certain things. But really the essence of fasting is abstention. And that is an inner dimension. Like at the core of it, as Muslims, when you talk about a mu'min, or what is iman, the very definition of iman is ma waqara fil qalb, what exists in the heart, and it's proven true by what you say and what you do, right? And so a lot of us live these lives, and you were saying how many of us have had these discussions with our kids, or sat at home and really been introspective. Our insides are not matching our external. And I think at the core of it, if you can get that to match, in terms of working on that inner, this has actually been, and I know this sounds so bad, it's actually been the best Ramadan that I've ever had. And a part of it is I had a huge trial that happened to me, and alhamdulillah, it forced me physically to stay home. So it was a health thing, and I was forced to stay home, which has never happened. And I've always been about the actions and everything. And I think I've probably done more in terms of worship and everything else than I've ever done. I'm so happy I don't have to do dinner parties, because we always have like a huge social schedule. I miss the masjid, but for sure it also forced my son and my sons and my husband to step up, lead Taraweeh, connect more to the Quran. And we're very blessed, alhamdulillah, to have people in the household that can do that. I mean, others don't. But when you look at Imam al-Ghazali and what he talks about fasting, and this is something we say to students, is that there's different levels of fasting, and we don't want the fasting of I didn't eat and I didn't drink and I just abstained from certain things. But the actual real he talks about ordinary fasting, which inshallah we don't want to be, but then he talks about the special fasting, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of the consuming, and whatever you consume consumes you, is that you have to restrain from everything that doesn't please, or try to restrain from the things that don't please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're thinking about what you're saying and what you're watching and what you're looking at and where you're going and all of these things. And so you begin then to busy yourself with, other things. And Dalia, you're talking about dhikr, but there are so many people who are not even praying their 5 prayers on time. And if you really love somebody, you want to meet them, right? You want to see them. If I agreed to come do this webinar because I haven't seen you in a long time, and I wanted actually to connect with Dalia. And subhanAllah, it's my first one since I've had this problem, but when you really like somebody, you want to talk to them and you want to see them, and that's your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's your dhikr, it's your salah, it's your reading your Quran, it's actually doing good, it's purifying your time. Like, people don't understand the actions that what Khaled was talking about. It's also a purification of your time. Giving zakah or sadaqah is a purification of your wealth. And so I think really looking at the inner dimension of what you're doing. Like when we say the shaitan is chained up, it's not just the shaitan is chained up. There's actually a hadith that, subhanAllah, that when there's, that the shaitan runs through your veins and that the hunger slows it down. I used to hate fasting, by the way, until I read this hadith. So Ramadan, even like the mercy of Allah, it's so easy to fast in Ramadan because Allah makes it easy to fast in Ramadan. You want to kill me, make me fast outside of Ramadan, right? Like, I'm not one of those people that fast every Monday and Thursday, all of those things. And subhanAllah, when I learned this, it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, okay, if this is going to work, then this is what I'm going to do, right? So, subhanAllah, when we understand those inner dimensions and understand that we need to be clean on the inside, more important, and all of these things. But Allah doesn't see those things. And true success is when your heart is pure and clean, and it can meet Allah in that state where Allah.
We're losing you, Rania. Okay, so your screen has frozen. So just a disclaimer here. This is, I know why all students love Rania now. So she gives them practical tips, and she does not in any way indicate that people should not fast Mondays and Thursdays. People should, inshallah. But she's reflecting that for everybody there is a challenge, and there is a way to get to your to achieve specific acts of worship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of us have our own individual struggles and challenges. I took the liberty of continuing.
So subhanAllah, certainly didn't work. Sorry, my internet did something, but anyway. I think
did a quick disclaimer about your your confession here. So I just said basically that what we meant is that we all have our own independent challenges and struggles to be better and to improve ourselves and to do more with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do these acts of worship. And really this takes me to my next point. And I think it's important to know where I want to go, and also try to understand, okay, so these are my success factors and success measures. And this is what I did even on a difficult path. But basically, what if I can't? What if I have challenges? What if I have setbacks? Does this mean it's over? Does this mean I can't go back? Does this mean I cannot change course? And this is really, without having this discussion, is not a real discussion, because we all make mistakes, as the Prophet ﷺ said, but the best ones who make, among those who make mistakes, are the ones who go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كل بني آدم خطاء وخير الخطاؤون التوابون. So really, and if we assume otherwise, then this is really not practical. And part of it, as we said, it's simple yet very real and practical. So if Dr. Fahmy can share a bit around this, and because we see this also in school, working with youth, not every path we take is the successful path that we can continue. But here, similarly with Ramadan, I can't. Some people, it's very. As Ron is saying now that this time is a special time. It's a special Ramadan but for some people it's actually extremely difficult. I can't do this and I can't do this and I can't get back to my normal routine. So how do we deal with these real challenges and emotional and psychological setbacks?
You know, we've all been at that moment where we feel like we are in the lowest of our iman. Or we might be saying, oh my gosh, tonight is the 29th night. It's the last odd night of the last 10 days. I haven't really done my part all month. It's too late. It's very easy to get stuck in that mindset. It's never too late. It is never too late. And when we think about, like, okay, all of what you're saying sounds fabulous, but I feel lost. I feel lost to the point where I'm almost not worthy. And I just, like, forget it. Like, stop talking to me about this stuff, because I'm so bad. I'm so lost. You don't know what I do. And there's no way I could stand in front of Allah. And we all have been there to some degree or not, some to extremes and in varying degrees. And so what I want to share is a small story from our Sira, from our religious history, to think about when this person felt lost, what happened. So in the 9th year of Hijrah, in the Battle of Tabuk, this was a time where the historically powerful Romans see that there's a group over there, the Muslims, and their message is spreading. And the Romans can't have it, right? They're powerful, right? They can't have something over there taking any essence of their power. And so a message is spread that there will be a battle, that they will battle the Muslims. And because the Romans can't have it, and Tabuk is a 1,000-kilometer journey away from the Muslims. And so the Prophet says to his companions, we are going on this journey to them. And so at this time, the companions are 30,000. And so the Prophet tells the companions, you have 3 days to prepare for this journey because we are going to battle the Romans. And so with eagerness, the companions start preparing, with eagerness, except for one, Ka'b bin Malik. And the story of Ka'b is narrated in Bukhari in its entirety. It's actually narrated by the son of Ka'b. And Ka'b is conflicted, right? He doesn't want to go on this journey to battle. And so the first day, everyone's getting ready and he's like, I got 2 more days. The second day, everyone's getting ready. He's like, well, I still have another day. And then the third day comes, he's still not getting ready. And then everybody leaves. And then he has that sinking gut feeling of, oh my God, what did I just do? Like, oh my gosh, they've all left and I'm behind. And he has that feeling that maybe all of us have felt to some degree in our lives where we've done something wrong and it's too late. It's too late. And the Prophet ﷺ has set out to a battle by people who are very powerful. And Ka'b is at home and he never goes. He never goes. And the nerves start to overwhelm him. And he's basically looking for an excuse, looking for a lie to tell himself, to say, it's okay, I'm good. But he can't find one. Now, Ka'b is the poet of the Prophet. And so 2 weeks into the journey, 1,000 kilometers is a lot, with a lot of people and a lot of gear. 2 weeks into the journey, the Prophet is looking for his poet. He's looking for Ka'b. And then the Prophet realizes that Ka'b never came. And so he remains quiet. Ka'b is home. And so the battle happens and the Muslims are victorious. And they are now coming home. And the message is sent that they're returning and they're returning victorious. And imagine 30,000 companions are returning on this long journey. And we all know that in our prophetic tradition, the first thing the Prophet ﷺ would do when he entered a city or returned to a city was right away go to the mosque, right away go to the masjid. And so imagine the sight, like really imagine the sight, 30,000 companions with the Prophet returning. And he goes into the masjid and they're victorious. Now, everyone who didn't go is running to the Prophet to say, I didn't go because of X, Y, or Z, so that the Prophet can say, it's okay, you're good. I mean, the Prophet knows, right? He knows. And so he's just giving everyone their pardon, fine, you're good, you're fine. And they're all telling Ka'b, just give the Prophet an excuse and he's going to just say you're good. And so Ka'b goes before the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ looks at him with the face of someone who's ghadban, someone who is not angry, not disappointed, but a combination of that. Like think about your parents when they're disappointed. Now think about the Prophet ﷺ being disappointed. And Ka'b knows. And he knows he has no excuse. And he confesses to the Prophet he has no excuse. And the Prophet says to him, go until Allah decrees for me what to do with you. Imagine what Ka'b must have felt at that second. The Prophet ﷺ, who they love each other. This is also a love story. The Prophet loves Ka'b and Ka'b loves the Prophet. The Prophet is disappointed and he tells him to go. Now wrap your head around the Prophet ﷺ is disappointed with an individual and how that person must feel. An edict is delivered that no one is to talk to Ka'b. No one is to do business with him. Now he's a young man. And nobody is to talk, he's to be ostracized from the community. And so Ka'b goes out on the first day and he sees Sayyidina Umar and he says, Assalamu alaikum. Sayyidina Umar doesn't answer him. And then he sees Uthman and he sees Abu Bakr and he tells them, Assalamu alaikum. And they don't answer him. And then he goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet won't answer him. Now, I want you to think about how lost Ka'b must feel at that second. The Prophet ﷺ won't answer him. And Ka'b is glaring at the Prophet. He just wants eye contact. And the Prophet will not make eye contact with him. But as soon as Ka'b would look away, the Prophet looks at him, because the Prophet loves him. And when Ka'b would look back at the Prophet would look away. And it's so hard and it's so painful because they love each other, but there's been this deep betrayal. And as time passes, it gets so much worse for Ka'b. And now Ka'b, out of desperation, goes to his cousin Abu Qatada, and he says, Assalamu alaikum. No answer. And he keeps yelling at him, Assalamu alaikum. No answer. And Ka'b says to him, don't you know that I love the Prophet? And his cousin Abu Qatada says to him, I actually don't know that you do. And this is the total blow. The questioning of someone's faith, someone's loyalty. Now, his relative is now also doubting him. And so rulers from other places hear about how Ka'b is being treated. And they say, forget them, come to us, right? They're not showing you the respect you deserve. But Ka'b knows that that's a test. And he never falls for this. All of us would have fallen for it. All of us would have said, yeah, they're not treating me fairly. This is unfair. I'm going. Ka'b never falls for this. Everyone tries, but nothing. And weeks pass. And Ka'b is all alone. He can't even pray in the masjid. And so he prays on the roof of his home. Yes, he's praying. Yes, in spite of everything, he's praying. Why? Because he knows that successful are the believers. And he knows that he's a believer. And so one morning, as he's completing his Fajr prayer, and he's sitting on the roof, he hears a munadi, he hears a caller, and the caller is saying to him, Abshir ya Ka'b, Abshir ya Ka'b. Be happy, O Ka'b, be happy, O Ka'b. Laqad taba Allahu alayk. Allah has forgiven you. Ka'b jumps up. He jumps up, and the companions are more excited than he is. He jumps up, he runs into the street, and the companions are flooding the street. They are happier for him than he is for himself. And he's so happy he actually encounters all of these people, but who do you think he wants to get to before anybody else? He just wants to get to the masjid, to the Prophet. And while he's running there, he encounters the munadi, the caller, and he wants to gift him with something, and he has nothing, so he actually takes off his cloak and gives it to him. And he enters the masjid. 50 days have passed, and there's been no eye contact with the Prophet. And their love for each other is so deep we can't understand it. And Ka'b walks in, and he sits at the feet of the Prophet, and he sees the face of the beloved. And Kana wajhu yubruq, the Prophet's face was glowing, is what the narration says. And the Prophet ﷺ tells Ka'b, this is the best day of your life. This is the best day of your life. Allah has revealed ayahs about you. I want you to think about this, and really, this is more for myself than anyone else. The Prophet ﷺ wouldn't look at him, completely ostracized from the community, wouldn't return his salam. And Allah revealed ayahs about him. Like, can you imagine? He betrays the Prophet, repents to Allah, and there's ayahs revealed about him. And this is in Surah At-Tawbah, which Brother Khaled mentioned at the beginning. And the ayahs are this: upon those who stayed behind, and the world became so constricted, and they felt lost. They knew that refuge was only with Allah. Ka'b knew that refuge was only with Allah. He never gave up. And so the rest of the ayahs are, so Allah repented upon them, so they repent. Imagine, like, when we talk about us feeling lost, can you imagine how lost Ka'b felt? And how not just Allah forgave, but Allah was waiting to forgive. In the infinite mercy, in these blessed nights where we know the angels are descending upon us, it's never too late. And it means that sometimes we are all sent these small reminders. A friend says something, you hear a lecture, you go to a conference, and all of these small reminders are there for us to know that there's no such thing as I'm too far. There's no such thing as I'm too far gone. There's no such thing as it's too late. That there's only 2 days left of Ramadan. I haven't even been praying. It's never too late. There's no such thing as too lost. Because imagine how lost and alone Ka'b must have felt. May Allah make all of us be repenters and accept our repent like that of Ka'b, and help us all to always return to Allah, and to see that true success is being a believer in someone that strives for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that our deeds are consistently accepted in His path, from making intention, to thinking about what does prayer do for our day, to really trying to excel in what we do. But also when you get down to it and you think, it's too late for me, I'm not that great of a person, or there's 1 day left and I didn't take advantage of the previous 29. Know that it's never too late, because if Allah can reveal ayahs about Ka'b when the Prophet ﷺ would not return his salam, then imagine what he's waiting to do for all of us.
Dr. Fahmy. This is one of the best tawbah stories in the Quran and in history, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes the people who were wrongdoers to themselves and to the community. So, and it was a public shaming, were publicly shamed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted that tawbah and actually honored them throughout history. And subhanAllah, if we take it from day one where they made the mistake, the next milestone where they are confronting the Prophet are confronted by the Prophet ﷺ, where they knew that it was a grave mistake, and then all this period all this testing period until they're certain that their tawbah was accepted, there was an action that is happening at this point too, which is an action of the heart. And that's the real part of the situation. The logic and the context, and as we say, the simple equation, yes, we made the mistake. Yes, they made a mistake. But it was their real tawbah that is deep from their heart that made them pass and succeed. It is not the much of the things that they've done, but it's more how their heart came close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and was open and purified for them to earn that status after. And that's a journey that is documented in the Quran, and Jazakallah khairan for sharing it with us today and with everybody. And it is actually up to us to really take it and apply it to ourselves, because we all make mistakes. We are all sinners, and we are all unaware how are we going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And really what we're in is only a matter of context. And it's a context of a very difficult, very special Ramadan, very difficult situation of lockdown and all this. But it is remove everything else, is really that context of a test of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see the best from you, from your heart and outward. And that's really where you try to investigate and explore. And that's what we're trying to do today through basically this reflective exercise, starting to appreciate where we are, where we stand, what are the markers that we can give ourselves, how can we simplify it, and how can we take these steps. And even if we fall back, we have a recourse, we have a way to come back, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He's closer to us than this jugular nerve vein. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically addresses, and a brother here shared the verse, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing those, His servants, who have misguided themselves or who have done so much wrong that they should not lose faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because simply Allah is the one who forgives sins. This is one of His attributes, that He forgives all sins. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ, that He is the forgiver and the most merciful. So really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to accept, but as you said, we need to think of our course and our course of action. I know we're close to our ending time, and I want to put that all into the context of really, is there going to be a new normal, or are we going back to our old selves and our old norms and the status quo? What do you think of this? Is it really going to change on the collective side, or really it's a function of the individual there? And how do we carry all this forward?
You know, I think one thing, at least what we've seen here in the United States, is that the veil on structural injustice and oppression has been removed. When you see that, for example, COVID has hit African Americans or the Black community much worse than every other community, where the elderly, in the state of New Jersey where I live, there are 10,000 COVID deaths and 5,500 happened in nursing homes. So basically we have a throwaway elderly population. And whether we like to believe it or not, we're all privileged, right? I am privileged. I have had the luxury of not having to leave my house in over 2 months. Everything's delivered to me. Everything's delivered to me by individuals who don't have that luxury. The woman the other day that delivered my food for iftar was a woman older than my mother, who's probably doing this because it's her only way to survive. How in the world is this okay? And what I think COVID has done, at least here in the United States, it's really removed any veil on our eyes that we are not a privileged community. And so what that requires for us to do is to rethink what are Muslim issues. What are Muslim issues are human issues. What's incumbent upon us as a community is to not just think about ourselves or what's happening in Islamophobia and different authoritarian regimes, but how can we make the world a better place? But how can we make our communities better places? And I mean the community at large. How can we talk about systems of injustice? How can I start to say that, how can we have over 50% of the elderly of the COVID patients that died in this country are in nursing homes? And so if we think about what this calamity has given us, it's also given us the unfortunate opportunity to see the mass injustices that surround us. It also has told us that we need to check our privilege, that we're a very privileged community also. And finally, it also gives us a way to rethink about what does it mean for me to live as a Muslim a life in service as I'm commanded to do. Service is not, going to a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving. It's reorienting, why did Allah put me here? What am I here for? And if it's not tied to a bigger picture and a bigger community, all for the attainment of the akhirah, then we're still not getting this message. And I think when we talk about going back to normal, I hope none of us want to go back to the explicit ignorance and and not taking care of one another that we know today we cannot ignore in order for us to advance forward. And so there's no going back. There's only moving forward as Muslim individuals, as spiritual beings, our families, our community, and what we owe society at large. And it's not just here in the United States or here in the West or North America. It's going beyond that. That the child in Afghanistan who has gotten used to the hum of a drone, or the Uyghur in the Cox's Bazar who's now also suffering from a typhoon no one wants to accept, that every single lived experience of every human matters just as much as mine. And it begins with checking my privilege and then checking my relationship with Allah. Why am I here? And what I hope that we get out of this Ramadan is that rearranging not just the furniture in our head, but reorienting our lives to looking at the bigger picture. We had gotten myself before anyone, so caught up in the everyday, right? And the deadlines and the markers and the months, without taking that step back and saying, wow, what is this all for? And here Allah is giving us the opportunity, and in the month of Ramadan, and in the last 10 nights. And if today is, Laylatul Qadr, a moment where the angels have descended upon the earth, including Angel Jibreel, only looking for those who have their hands up in dua. And so here we are. It's our moment to take advantage of all of this.
Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Fahmy. And I want to leave Sister Rania to also share her feedback or comments on what next, really, what's expected from us next after Ramadan, and is there an after COVID experience, or is it a continuous change in our lives? Sister Rania.
So Maya Angelou.
Rania, can you hear me?
Maya Angelou, who's a very famous. Yeah? Can you hear me? Khaled, can you hear me?
There is a lag, but
so
we can.
Maya Angelou, who is she's a very famous poet, and she said, when you know better, you do better. And I think a lot of people have learned a lot about themselves in isolation, and they've learned the negative and they've learned the positive, alhamdulillah. And I think there's a lot of people who've been working on themselves. And, the big thing that Dalia was saying is, we have to be like we have to be people who benefit other people. And Islam should transform you. The message of Islam should transform you. And that transformation should help you then to transform others around you. And you have a responsibility to do that, not just by your nature of having privilege. Even if you are not privileged, this is something that is your duty in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In our culture, we say, practice makes perfect, but the Islamic concept is not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not looking for perfection, when Dalia was talking before about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiving, we were actually doing the tafsir of Surah At-Tawbah recently, and subhanAllah, I remember thinking how authentic Ka'b was with himself and with the Rasul. He didn't make excuses, and he was really raw with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and really repented sincerely. And so, what I say to youth all the time is you need to compete against yourself, not against anyone else. And so every day, and this is post-COVID, every single day you need to be better than you were the day before. And that for me means that you're, inshallah, being successful. And like I said, when you know better, you do better. You don't go back to where the state that you were in before. And so like Dalia was saying, the big picture, and not just living in this selfish cocoon that we've been living in, but caring about everyone around us and doing whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever skills or talents Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, to use them for the betterment of not just myself, but for the betterment of society, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sister Rania, for these comments. I know, Dr. Dalia, you have another engagement right after this. We have a few questions that were asked, but I believe we've touched upon many of this through your discussions around being, is the ordinary okay? I'm not that active type of a person. Is the ordinary okay? Basically, the intersection between, like one of the questions here are, areas in public health and Islam will overlap. I truly believe that Islam keep with a deeper vision of public health. It seems somebody who's a professional in the field. And also around the psychology of humans during these times, intersecting with previous trauma, a person may not be in the mindset to create change within themselves. So really the questions here is about how at many different levels. I am the ordinary, I'm not the active community leader. Is it okay to be in the ordinary, and what's my frame of change there? And at the more abstract level, what kind of articulation of Islam that needs to be presented at these times where there is an opportunity to present Islam in its purest form, to be part of the solution, and not just a cultural minority that people are either appreciating or not, or totally ignorant of. So this is an opportunity where we can re-present Islam again. And again, in the extreme situation with people with traumatic experiences, it is also a challenge to do many of the things that we've discussed today. So if we can like quickly touch on this so that we've addressed those questions, and then I promise we'll close right away.
So I see Sister Layla's comments right now in the Q&A. And you're absolutely right in everything. You know, when we think about what the ethical principles of our faith, or maqasid al-sharia, are all about, they are tied to sanctity of mind, health, and body. And when we think about what happens, again, I'll stay here in the States, what happens in a lot of our inner cities where children grow up in abject poverty. In the United States, 1 in 4, this is before COVID, 1 in 4 kids is hungry. Where 1 in 3 in the elderly is hungry, where we have systemized injustice. We have a for-profit prison industrial complex, where when I lecture about Islamophobia, but when we don't focus on anti-Black racism, for example, or the indigenous in Canada, we don't focus on these issues. We don't see that oppression is not just intersectional compounded, but ours is on top of theirs. And for a very long time, we have not talked about our duties as Muslims to alleviate social ills, so that in my county, in the next town over, where there is poverty, that structurally should not exist. That in the same county, that a child, by virtue of the street they're born on, can die on the street that they're born on. Where I live in a county where one of the towns is known as the happiest place in America to live. How can that be? And we talk about Muslim issues as like foreign policy or Islamophobia or immigration or even the southern border, but what if Muslim issues are really tied to the ethical principles of our faith, the increased homelessness that's happening here in the United States and all over the world, the repression, structural injustices, the prison industrial everything. And we need to reorient our thinking towards that. Does that mean that, you know, someone said that the ordinary Muslim with the ordinary faster? We're not asked to do anything other than our capacity. And we're not asked to do anything other than live lives in the service towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everyone does not need to be an activist. Everyone needs to be the best version of themselves that they can be. And if it means that you call your mother regularly, then that's fantastic. And Allah wants nothing more than you from that. And if it means that you're dealing with compounded trauma, then do you think the benchmarkers for you are to start a democratic revolution? No, everyone is at a different level. And I don't want us to, I think Sister Rania said earlier, to compare ourselves to one another. No, everyone's journey is different. Everyone's spiritual journey is different. Everyone's spiritual test is different. Everyone's physical test is different. And nothing takes away from that. and just think about the compounded mercy of being in today. It's a difficult moment. I'm not gonna deny it. Here, every single one of our families has been afflicted. Every single one of our families has seen death. And for some, and many, and myself included, sometimes it's just about getting through the day, and that's a victory and that's success. But it's also the test of not losing faith that for most of us is the most critical test. And so don't undercut anything or exclude anything, but also our test is success towards the akhirah. It's not even protecting Islam. I always tell people, to young kids who are emphatic, I'm like, Allah's got his faith. Don't worry, he's going to take care of his faith, right? You need to take care of your soul. So I really hope and pray that in the last day, the last odd night, we can really reorient our thinking that the angels are with us and the sky is open and Allah does not ignore a hand that's raised in prayer. And so here's an opportunity. And I always find spiritual lectures difficult because I get a little emotional, but I promise you from now on, I'll be talking about war and peace, Islamophobia, and authoritarian regimes. Okay, Brother Khaled, enough of this spiritual stuff. But honestly, I know we're way over. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you. May Allah reward you for your ibadah and accept your prayer and your siyam and your qiyam, inshallah. And hopefully we will all be reunited here in the physical sense on this earth, but more importantly, inshallah, reunited in his shade on the day that matters most.
Ameen, ameen. Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Fahmy. And maybe that's a new normal, and you take this on and continue to remind people, inshallah, and integrate it actually in what you do. And with that, I actually want to close on a few practical concepts that were discussed today. Discussing basically the bulk of the situation that we're in, and the Ramadan and the opportunities and the challenges and the blessings on the individual and the communal level. But basically getting back into after Ramadan and as this crisis unfolds, there are practical things that can basically lead you to a new, better normal and a new, better lifestyle and a new, better relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the simple, most abstract example of even the earth and the environment took a break with all this pollution stopped and all this fuel emitting devices and machines and cars and planes have stopped. They've taken a break, and it's a chance for us, even at the individual level, if when we go back to normal, what are our environmental practices going to be like? Even like that practical sense, what type of car am I going to drive, or if I'm going to take more transit, this is a choice that you make as you get back to normal after realizing this on your personal health side as well. So you're getting back to normal, you got into the habit of jogging or running or walking or being health conscious. When you get back to, and you can go to the restaurants and the sweet eating places that I enjoy most, if you go back to this, how are you planning this go back? And more importantly, Islamically, and there is no distinction there, the choices previously are also part of your Islamic understanding, but on the individual level, as I go back after Ramadan, what did I carry? What credit and what habits and what introspection that led me? Because really most of our critical decisions are a choice that we make, and a choice that we make that takes us into a clear or a path. And that path, inshallah, should be a path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we come back at this, at our choices of what we do, of ibadah, of things that get us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we align it with our vision that we were able and were given the chance to think about, that's important. And lastly, at the communal and at the collective level, we realize that we can bring with Islam more benefit and to the people around us, it being structural injustice that Sister Dalia spoke about, or general benefit to the people around us. So really, there are many lessons that we learn this special Ramadan and this special night, where things are clearer at between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can inshallah use this time to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiveness for all of us here and who participated in our families and our communities, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate the suffering of everybody from this crisis or from other crises. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate the injustices that people are facing all over the world, and that we take part in elevating these sufferings and in these injustices. And with that, I thank both Dr. Fahmy and Sister Rania for their contribution to this discussion, and I hope we build on it still as a new norm after Ramadan, a mix of spiritual and socio-political discussions. And one last announcement that I leave here, this is the benefit of having the mic, is we're actually planning actually it's almost a once in a lifetime national celebration, Eid celebration, coast to coast, where we have live, we're covering live Eid celebrations from Quebec to Vancouver, where we're actually blessed that some of our centers are open and will actually have Eid Salah with certain measures following the public health directives in Vancouver and Alberta. And we'll also have a lengthy program from 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 7:30 p.m. with the spirit of Eid in it, in speeches, in concerts at the end of the day, and competitions. And we're trying, people can't go and celebrate in the masjid, we're trying to bring it back to you through here, and you can find all the information on maceidfest.com, maceidfest.com. And sorry? Yes, so we have a special concert
we have a
at the
huge
end of the day from 5 to 7. Yes, from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we hope all of you can tune in for some of the day. And please remember us all in your dua. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.